On a quiet stretch of American road that once carried the steady rhythm of post-war life, there stood a diner that most people never thought twice about. It wasn't famous. It wasn't written about in newspapers or photographed for magazines. It didn't have a clever slogan or a glowing reputation beyond the town limits. It was simply there, sitting close to the pavement, doing what it had been built to do. Feeding people. Giving them a place to rest. Holding their routines together, one cup of coffee at a time. And inside that diner, sometime in the fading years of the 1950s, a photograph was taken. No one present understood its importance. No one paused or reflected. Yet that image would become the last photograph ever taken inside those walls. To understand why that photograph matters, you have to understand the America it belonged to. The 1950s were years shaped by relief and optimism. The war was finally behind them. Soldiers had come home older than they left, carrying memories they rarely spoke about. Factories that once produced weapons now turned out automobiles, refrigerators, and kitchen tables. Suburbs spread outward, lawns were trimmed neatly, and families settled into routines that felt sturdy and reliable. There was a sense, whether real or imagined, that the country had found its footing again. The road beside the diner was part of that story. It wasn't an interstate yet. Those would come later. This was a two-lane highway, wide enough for trucks and sedans, lined with telephone poles and open fields. Travelers depended on places like this diner. There were no apps, no glowing screens telling you where to stop. You pulled over when you were hungry, when you were tired, or when you needed a moment of human contact before moving on. The diner opened in the early part of the decade. It arrived in pieces, hauled on flatbed trucks and assembled on site. Prefabricated diners were becoming common then, symbols of efficiency and modern design. Stainless steel panels gleamed in the sunlight. Large windows promised openness and light. When it was lowered into place, people gathered to watch, children sitting on fence rails, adults standing with arms crossed, curious about what this new structure would bring. The first night the lights came on, they glowed warmly against the darkening sky. The sign buzzed faintly, imperfect but proud. From that evening forward, the diner became part of the town's daily rhythm. It was as dependable as the sunrise and just as easy to take for granted. Inside, the floor was laid in black and white tiles, clean and sharp at first, though they would soften over time under countless footsteps. The counter curved gently, its surface smooth and cool, polished daily and worn slowly by years of elbows and coffee cups. Vinyl stools lined the counter, red and glossy in their early days, each one able to spin with a faint squeak that children found endlessly amusing. Behind the counter, a long mirror stretched across the wall, reflecting the room back on itself, doubling the sense of space and life. Every morning before the sky began to lighten, the same man unlocked the front door. He had served overseas during the war and returned with a quiet seriousness about him. He believed in showing up early and doing things the same way every day. He brewed the first pot of coffee, listening to the familiar gurgle and hiss. The grill warmed slowly, and soon the smell of bacon drifted through the room, mixing with coffee and cleaning solution. That smell alone was enough to draw people in. Truck drivers were usually the first customers. They slid onto stools with practiced ease, ordered without looking at the menu, and spoke in low voices about road conditions and delivery schedules. Farmers followed, hats placed carefully on the counter beside them, boots dusty from fields work since before dawn. They ordered breakfasts they had ordered for years, eggs cooked the same way, toast buttered. Just right. By 7 o'clock, the diner was fully awake. The women who worked there wore neat uniforms and paper hats that folded just so. Their names were stitched onto their chests, though most customers never needed to read them. Orders were remembered without writing. Coffee cups were refilled before they were empty. Preferences were learned and never forgotten. In a place like this, remembering was part of the service. They listened to stories, too. Stories about weather, crops, children, aches and pains, and memories that surfaced unannounced. Many of those stories were repeated day after day. The women nodded and smiled, responding as though each telling was new. In a small town, listening was as important as serving food. Afternoons belonged to the teenagers. After school, they filled the booths with noise and movement. Jackets were tossed aside. Books slid under seats. They ordered fries and milkshakes, shared straws, and talked about music, cars, and plans that felt both urgent and far away. College, work, marriage, the wider world. It all hovered somewhere beyond the windows, just out of reach. Evenings were quieter. Couples stopped in after church meetings or long shifts at the plant. Families shared meals without rushing. Sometimes a jukebox played softly, not loud enough to interrupt conversation. The diner absorbed it all without comment. It witnessed first dates and last meals together. It held celebrations and disappointments with equal patience. The diner saw people at their most ordinary moments, which are often the most revealing. It saw marriages begin over pie and coffee, and it saw those same couples sit in silence years later, their hands no longer touching. It saw new babies celebrated and losses mourned over plates that went untouched. It saw men leave town chasing opportunity and others return, defeated but welcomed back without questions. Through it all, the diner remained unchanged. It did not ask for attention or praise. It simply existed, steady and reliable, holding the town's daily life inside its walls. The photograph that would later become so meaningful was never meant to be anything special. It wasn't planned or staged. It was taken by a man who carried a simple camera and liked to document the world around him. He wasn't a professional. He didn't think of himself as an artist. He liked freezing moments that felt honest, moments that might otherwise slip away unnoticed. That afternoon, the light came through the front windows at an angle that softened everything it touched. Dust motes drifted lazily in the air, catching the sunlight like tiny stars. The lunch rush had passed. Only a few customers remained. One man sat at the counter with a cup of coffee growing cold in front of him, lost in thought. A waitress leaned back slightly, rubbing her feet when she thought no one was looking. A couple shared a quiet conversation in a booth, their voices low, their expressions serious but calm. The photographer stood near the door. He lifted his camera without speaking. No one posed. No one smiled or adjusted their posture. The shutter clicked once. That was it. A fraction of a second, captured on film, unnoticed by everyone else in the room. At the time, the diner was already closer to its end than its beginning, though few understood that. Change rarely announces itself clearly. The highway that once brought steady traffic was being rerouted. New roads promised faster travel and fewer stops. Gas stations began offering food that could be eaten quickly, without conversation or commitment. People learned to keep moving. Within a year, the diner felt different. The regulars still came, but there were gaps now. Empty stools lingered longer. Booths sat unused during hours that were once busy. Repairs were delayed. The sign flickered more often. The owner watched these changes quietly, understanding. More than he let on. One morning, the door stayed locked. The coffee was never brewed. The grill never warmed. People arrived out of habit and stood outside, confused, reading the small notice taped to the glass. There were no speeches, no ceremony, just an ending. The diner was sold, then dismantled. Stainless steel panels were unbolted and loaded onto trucks. Some pieces found new life elsewhere. Others were discarded. The lot where it once stood became something else, then something else again. Time moved forward, as it always does. The photograph sat undeveloped for months. When it was finally printed, it joined others in a small box. Life went on. Years passed. The photographer aged. His hand shook slightly when he held the camera. His memories softened around the edges. When he passed away, his belongings were sorted through by family members who recognized some faces in the photographs and not others. That last photograph nearly disappeared forever. It showed nothing dramatic. Just people eating, waiting, living. But someone paused. Someone felt a quiet pull they couldn't explain. They kept it. Decades later, the photograph resurfaced. It was scanned, shared, and studied. Not because it showed something rare or shocking, but because it showed something familiar that no longer existed. People recognized the counter, the stools, the light. They remembered their own diners, their own routines, their own moments spent in places that felt permanent until they weren't. The faces in the photograph remain unnamed. Their stories are unfinished. We don't know what became of them. And that uncertainty is part of the photograph's power. It doesn't tell us what to think or feel. It simply invites us to remember. The last photograph ever taken inside that 1950s American diner is not just about a building or a moment. It is about the quiet importance of ordinary places. It is about how routine gives shape to our lives, and how those routines become memories before we realize it. When you look at the photograph long enough, you can almost hear the soft clink of cups against saucers. You can imagine the low murmur of conversation, the hiss of the grill, the gentle squeak of a stool turning. You can almost smell the coffee. For a brief moment, the diner is alive again. Not because it was preserved, but because it was remembered. And in that remembering, we find something of ourselves.